Welcome back to Calvary Life. This is the podcast of Calvary Baptist Church and the membership of Calvary Baptist Church and anybody else out there that's interested in local church life. I'm Charles Uptain, the executive pastor, and today I have with me two of our members, one staff member and also an elder with us. So, guys, introduce yourselves and we'll talk about a mission trip that you just went on.
Well, I'm Ian Worrell, and I'm an elder here at Calvary.
And I'm Tommy Perry. I am the missions director here at Calvary.
So you both just got back from a mission trip, and so that's really what we want to talk about today is your trip to Kurdistan, right? And so tell us, I guess, about the trip, and as in, just briefly what the point of going was, what the purpose of it was, and that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, Charles, just like you mentioned, we just got back from Kurdistan, northern Iraq, Erbil in particular, to visit our missions partners there, Joe and Andy Carroll and their family. 3 kids they have, Peter, Noah, and Jeremiah, right, Ian? And I would say the purpose of this trip was to see what the work is about, because we've never been. This is one of those trips we've never made to.
Yeah, we've seen Joe's come to us a couple of times.
Yes, Joe's come to us several times. Yes,
he preached for us a couple of weeks back. If you remember that, if you were here during our missions conference, he preached on that Sunday morning. So we may know Joe, but we don't know about his work.
His work there, yeah. So that's what we went to see, lay eyes on, see what the work was about, and just be an encouragement to Joe and Andy, their family, as best we could. As we found out, I think Ian would agree that Joe kind of undersold what's going on over there.
Quite a bit.
in many ways to us. But I think that's the nature of Joe. He's just a humble guy who's just doing the Lord's work and pastoral work there. And so that's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, and so we normally do these. We really, how we handle mission trips right now is most of the time on Sunday night we'll have a 5 or 10 minute time period where we want to let whoever went on the trip to really talk about the trip and just get the church a flavor of it. But when you two guys came back, it was like, this is not going to work in 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, we were overwhelmed, oversaturated with information, really.
Yeah, so that's why we decided, hey, let's put a podcast out there that's give you time to talk, and then of course we're also going to talk about it Sunday night. So we are going to give you more than 5 or 10 minutes, so to speak. But we do want to maybe this is a whetting of the appetite, or even maybe more of that, a main dish here of what happened with your trip. One thing I always think about mission trips is that we normally go expecting to be a blessing to the people we're going to be an encouragement, like you mentioned, Tommy. Mm-hmm. But it seems like every time we do that, we always come back and say how they blessed us or how it was encouraging to us. So I'm thinking that's probably what happened as well to you. Can you tell us, either one of you, what you got out of the trip, what blessings you saw and were able to see through the trip?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to make some statements first. I'm going to kind of set the context. I think, when we talk about Iraq and we think about what the news media puts out, we can be very stereotypical of it. I knew I could have been and still, well, not anymore, but was before we went on the trip. And, if we think, when you hear about Iraq, you kind of think that it's all Arabs.
Yeah.
They're all Muslims. They don't favor Americans very well. It's all desert, and there's no Christians there, or if they are, they're underground. And, I think the media has done a very poor job of portraying what's really going on there. There was a time when we had war going on, and it was not a safe place to be. But I can say I never felt unsafe there at all.
No.
I think Erbil as a city is safer than Dothan.
Really?
As far as crime.
Yeah.
There's no worry about someone harming you there. Now, you are in the Middle East, so there's potential for your bad neighbors to kick off a war at any point, but I think you can get out of there pretty quick. But as far as feeling endangered, I never did. And we also found that there were many believers there. A lot of missionaries, a lot of Westerners, people from all over the world are coming there for work. So, there's just so much going on there. I don't even know where to start. But I would just like to say up front, all the people that were, praying for our safety, you probably need to pray for our safety more when we go to the mall here than when you go to Erbil. But Joe and Andy were such gracious hosts. They had us in their home, made us part of their family, and man, they treated us like royalty. So it really was a blessing. It changed my perspective on the whole area. It changed my perspective on some other countries, and it changed my perspective on what how the gospel's going forth there.
Yeah, and I would say that you talk about blessings. I think the hospitality that was shown to us by and the fact that again, as Ian said, made us a part of their family. It's like their whole family, in many respects, does gospel work together. And when we went to somebody's home to have gospel conversations, well, of course we didn't, but we observed. But the whole
barrier.
Yeah, there you go. The whole family went, kids, everybody, and so just the Christian hospitality toward us, but also just the Christian hospitality we saw at the International Church there, and even the Kurdish Church. It's just it runs deep there, and so and I just saw just healthy gospel centered work. And got a clearer picture of what's going on, because a lot of that was kind of shrouded in mystery because we'd never seen it, and so
you mentioned that we usually think of, if there's Christians there, they're underground. I mean, that's how I thought about it. Is in so what do we need to know or help us understand how the gospel is going forth in that area in Erbil versus, I guess, that mindset we have that everything's underground and not allowed to talk about Christ, not allowed for the gospel to spread as we would be able to here.
Right. Well, we kind of going into it, we thought Joe was just there leading a church, kind of a man on an island, so to speak. But the Carrolls have such a great support family, I guess is the best way to say it, organization.
Yeah, network.
So the Kurdish church, EEC, Emmanuel Evangelical Church, I believe it is a plant of EBC, Erbil Baptist Church. They meet in the same building, just on different days. So Erbil Baptist Church is the parent there, and I believe they are a church plant from another church in UAE, which we'll probably get to a little later. But they also have a foundation there called the Mustard Seed Foundation, which initially started out as a way for them to have an NGO, a non-government organization, to get religious visas for a year long instead of having to get a 30-day visa every month.
Yeah.
But it has since spread into so many other areas. So I guess we just kind of need to hit on all three of these, as briefly as we can. But the Mustard Seed Foundation, he called them 3 buckets: engage, equip, and enable. And so we're starting with enable. That's the part that goes along with the getting the visa and legal services. It's allowing the pastors and the missionaries there to do the work and not have to worry about the bureaucracy of dealing with the government there. They also have the Christian school there. Let me look at my note I took. They have, I think, 41 students.
42 students.
42 students
I've
now?
got the flyer, Ian. 42 students,
There you go.
yeah. 24 families from 11 countries, 18 staff from 6 different countries. And again, this is an international school. They're based, again, in the church, Erbil Baptist Church. They're using those facilities and to give this service to mainly missionaries, but also others who are part of a pastoral internship program from other countries, men who are there.
People just working there.
And people, just working there. And so, that's part of it. So I didn't mean to.
And I heard several missionaries say that school is a game changer because the biggest reason families come off of the mission field is that when you get into the upper grades, they don't have education opportunities for their kids. So now this allows them to stay longer and be more engaged in gospel work and not worry about, are my kids getting a good education?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a huge, huge thing. And then the next bucket they got is equip. And so under this kind of bucket, they do conferences and seminars. As we were leaving, Jeremy, one of the guys working at the Mustard Seed Foundation, they were getting ready to put on a marriage conference. They do preaching conferences for expositional preaching, and they do conferences about healthy church membership and living. They have a pastoral internship program, which we got to sit in on a couple of meetings, and that's incredible in its own right, because they're bringing people in. Some of them had seminary degrees, some of them didn't. But they're coming in, they're learning what good ecclesiology looks like, what good preaching looks like, what good missiology looks like.
Yeah.
And so these guys are going back into their own neighborhoods and countries and reaching and planting churches in their own languages.
Yeah.
Also under that equip, they have a thing called let me see if I say this right, Dilsazi.
Yeah. Close. Yeah.
Is that close?
That's close, yeah. Close enough.
Close
For
enough.
us English speakers.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
It's
Yeah,
a local
I thought
word.
it was great.
It's a local Kurdish
I
word.
thought you were
believe.
local already.
Yeah, I'm on my way. But what they do is they
Might be
take
more truth to that than you think.
they take language, they take resources and materials such as books, articles, and videos, and they translate them into the local languages, which would be the 3 dialects of the Kurdish language, Arabic, and Farsi.
Yeah.
And so you have all these different groups there.
Yeah.
And we got to go and look at a Christian bookstore there. I think there's one of 2 in
Yeah.
the cities. And when I say Christian bookstore, it's about the size of this room, and it's split down the middle of the wall. And they just don't have the resources that we have. I mean, we can go to Barnes & Noble and find Christian books. We can go online and get anything we want,
Yeah.
thousands upon thousands, and they have all their books in 2 rooms.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, some of the not-so-great books, like Joyce Meyer and such, have made it over there. So there's a great need for good, solid resources.
Yeah. So there's gospel work there through these means, the school, the pastoral internship program, and just kind of what I saw as well. And I think Ian, it's just this one-on-one kind of discipleship that's taking place, or maybe even what we would call pre-discipleship with non-believers, if you will.
yeah, absolutely.
Just reading through the book of Mark for a year and a half before someone comes to faith in Christ, in-home gospel conversations. We were on 2 of those. We went to 2 of those, 2 different settings, Kurdish settings, in a sense of, I guess, socioeconomic level for sure. And again, just the healthy church planting, just a long-term view. You know, it's not quick turnaround. Hey, we want to get this done in 6 months. It's the long view.
Yeah.
You know, with ministry, and we talk about that many times. I mean, staff meeting in other places, and that's what you have to be there. It has to be that way, just because of the culture and the backgrounds where people are coming out of, Muslim backgrounds usually, which are different than Christian backgrounds of Kurdish individuals. Or Arab individuals, and so gospel work. Your question that's how it's going forth in those various means and ways and avenues, I guess.
Yeah.
So
The only thing I know of the Mustard Seed Foundation from the beginning, before y'all went, was, that's, of course, we do support Joe and Andy monthly, and that's how we support them. There's different ways to do different supports, different countries. Sometimes it's a transfer, a wire transfer. Sometimes it's to another organization, and so that has been the organization that we have used to give our monthly support to them. Yes. But that's all I knew of them. I didn't know they were an actual, like you said, NGO that had all these other things underneath them that really is a main piece of the gospel puzzle in Erbil.
And in the last bucket, just to finish this off, is they're engaged, and this is where they work in the community. And so, when ISIS came through the area, they didn't make it all the way to Erbil, but when they came through Mosul and some of northern Iraq there was a lot of refugee camps established in Erbil.
Yeah.
And so they were working in those camps. They've mostly all closed down. We drove by a few of them, and they look pretty desolate now. But they were working there to meet needs and also share the gospel. They work with the government and the community. It's called Flourishing Together. And we got to sit in on one of the presentations. They brought a businessman in from the Pacific Northwest, and he did an entrepreneurship discussion in like a coffee shop down there.
Yeah.
And he brought the gospel right into the middle of his conversation. So it was not only a way to empower them to,
Small business
and such, but they're also getting in gospel conversation there. And there were some questions about that. I hope they get some feedback from that. And the last one is he said it was a terrible word to use, but a hobby. It's called release, and they called it a hobby because they just don't have the funding to do it full time. But human trafficking and slavery are still a big deal there. So to give you an example, one of the last ones that they got released was a woman who came there, I believe from Africa.
Yeah, Africa.
To get a job cleaning someone's house with a cleaning company. And once they get into the home, their passport's confiscated. They're locked in the basement when they're not doing work. And you have modern day slavery. Now, it's illegal in the country, but if no one knows you're there, who's going to do anything? And so they worked with some local lawyers and got her released. And as she's getting on dropping her off at the airport, she hands off like 5 more people.
Wow.
And so, there's a big need there. Yeah. So they are doing a lot of work with the Mustard Seed Foundation.
Yeah. Well,
did I miss anything on that one, Tommy?
I think you covered it all. So,
well, let me ask you about this.
Yeah.
Joe's the pastor of a Kurdish-speaking church that is, you said, a plant.
Yes.
Of another church.
Erbil.
Right.
Baptist.
How long has Joe been pastoring that? Do you remember?
That's probably about a year and a half that they've been meeting. Yeah. As a Kurdish congregation.
Yeah, and so he was a member of the.
Yes, he was an elder.
He was an elder. That's
elder
right.
at the Erbil Baptist Church, still. Again, since their services on 2 different days,
in the same building.
In the same building, the Kurdish church meets on Wednesday night, and then the International Church meets on Friday morning. He and his family still go to the International Church on Friday mornings as a family, and so which we had to experience both of those church services. So,
and that's really good for him because he's not the man out on the island alone.
Yeah.
He has a healthy church to be a part of and engage with other families and be part of a Christian community and get refreshed and renewed and to pastor well.
Yeah.
So as we, as Calvary talks about church planning, as we're in the midst of prayer of that, as a congregation, we'll really, look at a resolution to begin a church plant in the next few weeks. Is there anything that we can take from what y'all saw from what Joe and his church, how they were planted out of another church? Anything that we can, anything that we need to see or anything that will be helpful for us as we think about that process of church planning?
I would say the big thing is training up leaders. The pastoral internship program there, it really blew me away. It takes about $12,000 to put a student through that. The reason being is that they don't want them to have worry about having a job during that time because they work pretty long hours over there, 6 days a week. So they want them to be able to focus on their studies. But they take them through a slew of books and some other training, and by the time they're done with that, they are ready to lead a congregation. And we've seen that already. We met Baha. He is from Syria. And he went through that, and he has, I believe I saw on this Mustard Seed Foundation a picture of him being ordained, and he is looking to plant an Arabic-speaking church there. One of the men that was in there, Imran, is from Pakistan, and he went to seminary in South Korea, and has a little bit charismatic background. And he came there, and he's part of the pastoral internship, and now he's seeing what good theology looks like, what good ecclesiology looks like. And he, despite, fearing for his daughter, because they're, the women are not treated real well in that country, he says, I have to go back because even though Christians are only, I think he said 2% there, that's still 200,000 people who need good, solid preaching and teaching. And so looking at that as a model, I could tell you more stories from Sia and Ramon and the other guys there, Andre. They're all doing great things. And looking at that as a model for us, I think preparing people who feel called to the mission field or to plant a church or what have you in that way would be incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would add. I mean, it's not a, like I said earlier. It's a long-term process. But I know, as far as Joe's concerned, in the planning of the Kurdish congregation, that was years in the making. That wasn't 6 months. Hey, let's decide. And so, yes, things are slower there. I think the culture's maybe a little bit different, obviously, than American culture. But much prayer goes into that, and just it's not necessarily a fast track. Even though there are needs, obviously, for those churches to be, but they need to be healthy.
Yeah,
and that's where the slowness comes in to the equation, I think. And so I think that's one thing that maybe we can glean or incorporate into is that kind of aspect. You want your church plant to be healthy. You want it to endure, right? And so I think that slowness helps in that process. We don't get not to say get ahead of God, but you know what I mean by that. And so I did, that's maybe one of the things that and they're starting from scratch, especially with a Kurdish congregation.
Yeah.
And even they're looking to plant others in other cities to the north, which are a little bit more difficult. Not quite, they're smaller. So the persecution there for the Kurdish believers is greater than it would be maybe in Erbil. It's still there, but they're looking to find avenues and ways to plant other congregations in other cities already, from that group, if you will.
Yeah.
And so, and then that's one of Joe's prayer things. We'll get to that a little bit later, about the Lord would raise up elders to serve alongside of him, because he's the only one in that church now.
Yeah.
There's some deacons, but not anyone. There's one in training, I think, pastoral.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned his name earlier, but he's a young guy.
Yeah.
And so anyway.
Yeah, and this church planting is not something new for Calvary. We've done church planting in the past, and of course we have a church plant in Manhattan. Steve and Tony are there, been there for 7 years now, and so we're still heavily involved in supporting Steve and Tony, and so this is not something brand new for Calvary, but I think it is new in the aspect of trying to repeat or to give a healthy DNA for a church planting a church, versus sometimes we've kind of seen it as just this person who feels like they should be a church planter, and then we get them hooked in with NAM. And NAM tells us that these are the cities that need a church planter, and then we pray and let NAM do the training, and we send them. They are sent, but there's not as much, I don't guess, of the ownership of the church. Mm-hmm. And Ian, you and I were having a conversation after you got back about a podcast that Nam Marks has done called Storms in the Desert.
Yeah.
And I had been listening to it before we talked. I had listened. In fact, I think I finished it right before we talked that day, and so it was kind of putting pieces together for me from some of the conversations I'd had with you, and what I'd heard from Tommy, and then what I heard from them. So tie that together for us a little bit to see, I guess, the way that the churches, those churches are healthily planning other churches, and what you can see through that podcast.
Yeah, sure. I'm on my third time through it, by the way. I thoroughly enjoy it. So it follows a church in the United Arab Emirates, UCCD, and I'm not going to attempt to say what that stands for. But it follows this church as it grows, and then God just brings them opportunities to plant churches in other emirates there in the UAE. And it just kind of happens naturally. It's slow work. I think Mark Dever said if you check in with them every year or two, you might not see what's going on, but if you check in every 5 or 10 years, you'd be amazed at what's happening. And so lots of opportunities have been put before them, and they have planted churches. Oh, my goodness. I can't even name all the countries. I know they've been in, I'm trying to think off the cuff here, several in UAE. Erbil Baptist Church is a product of that. I don't know if it comes directly from that church, but they are an offshoot of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you can see just how one church full of faithful members with good theology and doctrine, good ecclesiology, good missiology, end up going and spreading. And they're starting to spread across, the whole continent.
Yeah.
And it's really great to see. And, while we were there in Erbil, we got to see some of those pastoral interns who are in turn going to continue that work. And so it just keeps spreading across a place that we see is hostile to the gospel.
Yeah.
Which is just incredible to see what the Lord's doing.
Yeah, and the pastor there at Erbil Baptist, David Lawrence, and Stephen, can't remember Stephen's last name. He's director of the Mustard Seed Foundation. They had just got back from a conference. Basically, it's kind of like a network of churches that they're a part of, Erbil Baptist, plus the ones in the UAE that Ian has mentioned that have come out of this one, a part of 7 or 8. Maybe there's one in the Philippines as well, that they met together as a kind of like the Southern Baptist Convention has, an association of churches. So there's 8 or 9 that are part of their own association within that area in the Middle East, and other. I think one from Africa, maybe one from.
Yeah, he said they were from everywhere from Germany all the way over to Bangkok, Thailand.
Yeah,
wow.
They just didn't have an association, so they kind of came together.
Yeah.
They're like-minded.
Yeah.
So, and UAE is kind of their hub, Dubai there.
It's the hub there in Dubai.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, so, for us, I know Paul's not here with us today, but, my conversations with him and conversations with the elders and even our conversations to the church, I really feel like this is what God is calling us to try to not do the same thing, as in because we're going to do what Calvary is, what we're DNA are made up to God to do, but to be a healthy church planner of other churches and to have those other churches that then we can have those partnerships with that have the same mindset that we have towards mission, same mindset we have towards ecclesiology. And so, when I listen to that podcast, it really just kind of, I guess it fires me up to think about what we could be looking at 10 years down the line from where we are today at Calvary, and have some of our elders who have come through, who've gone through the elder development process and have become elders at Calvary, but feel like they could be a church planner or a part of a team somewhere else close by, and then we have a sister church that has been birthed and then has their own elders and then their own church planning strategy. I just see what could we see if we just take it slow and don't, like you said, Tommy, don't measure it today and tomorrow, but do it in a healthy way where we could be.
Yeah.
If we're it just seems to me like it's just having the mindset towards churches, planning churches, is what we need.
In that podcast, I can't quote it word for word, but Mark Dever talked about John Newton, and one of the guys that he discipled was in, I believe, Australia, doing missionary work there. And he wrote back to say how discouraged he was because of how slow it was going. And John Newton wrote back to him and said, I've heard of gardeners that can plant salad seeds and have the greens for a salad while the meat's roasting. He said, but you're not creating salads. You're creating a healthy church, and you're planting acorns, and you want to see oaks grow, and that takes time.
Yeah.
He said, I trust that you're doing work for the next century. That's hard in our culture because we are very instant gratification oriented.
Yeah.
And that's a good point, because talking with Joe, and how many times a Kurdish congregation has tried to be planted in the city and has failed for various reasons. We won't go into those, but he mentioned those. But he wants that work to last and be enduring. And so, so to your point about planting acorns to grow into oaks, that's what you want to see, not just spring up and then in 2 or 3 years it's fizzled out. And so, and again, that's just takes patience, patience by leaders and congregation and members, and just faithful plodding, And again, that's not the American mindset, I know. But I think it's the Christian one in that sense. It's the gospel-centered one. And so, anyway.
So maybe that's what we should take, or at least should think about as we look at, our next steps towards the church and the resolution of church planning is, the first question that came to Paul that Sunday night we had members meeting, first question is, how long is this going to take, or something to that effect, or when are we going to start, kind of thing, versus okay, maybe that's not the right way to look at this. Maybe we should be looking at
it'll take as long as it needs to take.
Let's look at the steps that it's going to take to get there, and when we do this step, then we'll move to the next step, kind of thing, and really have a healthy markers, so to speak, that we're meeting versus a timetable that says, oh, we want to be having services in 6 months. I think it probably would be wise of us to not put those artificial dates out there. Instead, let's just pray about it and not be slow, as in not moving, but do our due diligence to be healthy as we move along.
Yeah. And support even when the work is slow, because, we're talking about souls here, not numbers.
Yeah.
And we need to be in it for the long haul.
Yeah. Well, let me switch gears a little bit, just to talk about our mission support. We have different kind of support for different types of missionaries. Tommy, as you look across the field, across the world, that we do missions from here in Dothan all the way across to, I guess, the India area, as far out that way, but everywhere in between. Yeah. What kind of support do you think should Calvary be thinking about, and what works best for how we support the folks in our bill for Joe and Andy, and what are we doing? Is that what we should be doing? Is there more? What did y'all kind of see that as you kind of were on the ground?
Yeah, and I mentioned this, I think, in staff meeting, and as far as there are various places we go and do training, pastoral training, for churches, individual churches, when it comes to ecclesiology or missiology or proper theology, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that group of folks there, they understand that, they have it. And so when we think about how we can be involved, I know in the next, what would it look like for us to best partner? We ask Joe and Andy about that. We ask about, coming over and, once a year would be a good encouragement for them. One of the guys said that, I think it was Jeremy or maybe it was Stephen that said to you,
it was Jeremy,
he said, you can come see somebody other than Joe too, and so since we made friends.
Yeah, he did say they were extremely encouraged. They don't get a lot of visitors because...
Obviously, because of what we've
bad
been
press,
taught. Yeah, exactly, what we've been taught by the media.
Yeah, and so I think Ian and I had this discussion, I don't know, as far as not long-term, maybe long-term, but for them, it's just, I think it's, for them personally, it's just going and having conversations and letting them, not necessarily us give counsel, but just to listen to their stories and listen to, and see the work. And I think that's good for their souls, if you will. And so, and again, we're talking about maybe a couple, a man and his wife, and would be great. I know Ian and I went just 2 or 3 folks at the most. And so, but I think maybe long term as well. Ian and I had this conversation about maybe financially supporting an intern for Joe to within the Kurdish congregation, a pastoral intern, to raise up, to train, to to help lead in that congregation. And again, that's a number of $10,000 to $12,000 a year or so. For that to,
and even if they don't have someone in the Kurdish church ready, there are still other guys who are going across the world in places we can't get to.
Yeah.
So to have that funds there at the ready when someone presents well, for that position, it would be great for them.
And I know we you mentioned the initiative by the Mustard Seed Foundation with Kurdish resources that Joe's working on, along with another guy who's a former IMB missionary, actually,
Andrew,
as well. Had great conversations with Andrew as well. But just maybe financial support for more translation work of good materials, because there's not very many. Because the Kurdish culture, they don't read. They don't read enough. Not like other cultures, maybe not like Arabic culture or Farsi or whatever it might be. And the language is different. So not just one language. There's 3 different dialects within the Kurdish. There's Barzani, Sorani, and Kurmanji.
Kurmanji. That one's fun to say.
I know, right? And so sounds like Jumanji.
I was about to say, isn't that a game that was a movie or something?
There you go. And so there's a need for that. Joe's working on an Advent devotional in Kurdish for his believers in his church for Christmas time. And so, and then I think also, and Joe sent this to us. We mentioned earlier the Christian Academy there. The Christian school there. Maybe someone at some point, it feels led to be sent there to help lead that or help teach in that or be a part of that network of people there.
They have an opening.
Yeah, there's openings.
They have a current opening.
There's current openings.
They're trying to recruit Tommy for that.
I'll give Joe a plug for this. So they're trying to. Secure teachers, and there's a flyer. I've got a flyer, so if you want any more information, you can just send me an email, and I can get that to you about it. But I think those are ways in which in the future we can help support. It is different than the Guatemalas or the Vermonts or even the Indias with our partners there. This is a different work and a different culture, but same gospel.
Yeah.
Same gospel work.
Well, and from what I know of them, and I know of Joe, a lot of the same ecclesiology, the same missiology.
Yes, for sure. Yes.
And so that's something that we want to. I don't know if guard is the right word, but maybe it is as elders. We want to guard our missions to be, who we are. That our mission partners look like us, and that's just easier all the way around. It just helps us do ministry better together. Not that we have to be exactly like-minded all the way across, because there's cultural things and those kind of things, but we should have those tier 1 issues at least should be very similar, so that we can do work together. We can participate together.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, so
I think they are.
I would love to see us send someone there.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, there's needs. They were trying to get me to be a assistant pastor up in DeHook.
Yeah, not just me.
They had us jobs while we were there.
Well, we just need to pray for it. I think.
But there's needs. There are needs there.
That's one thing I think we as elders, and Ian, you and I have an elders meeting tonight. Maybe you or I need to say this in boldness: is say, we need to be praying as elders that we're calling out people to go fill these positions.
Absolutely.
Not that we're just sending our money, but that we're praying for God to touch somebody in our own congregation that will go and meet this need. And we're hearing about it.
Yeah. And the great thing about that group of people over there, we got to sit in on a staff meeting for the Mustard Seed Foundation. They are cohesive. They have a good team. I left there going, wow, I would love to work for somebody like this, because you walk right into a good, solid organization that has their act together, and they love Jesus, and they're about getting the gospel out.
Yeah. Well, we just need to be praying for that, and even adding it to our Sunday night prayer times, Tommy.
Yeah.
Being the things that we pray for as a congregation, for some more to be called.
Yeah, definitely. That would be a good point.
Well, speaking of prayer, tell us what we can, as the church, be praying for this ministry for.
So if you want to pick up a card, you can. We've got them out this month in the missions kiosk in the foyer, prayer cards for Joe and Andy there. And on the back, there's 3 points. These are updated. He sent these to me just recently. But to pray for God to preserve and strengthen the unity among the members of their church. The Kurdish church it's a very, very, they don't trust each other very much.
They're very tribal.
Very tribal people. And so pray for unity in that. And we, like we mentioned earlier, for Kurdish elders to be raised up to serve alongside Joe in those positions, because that's very demanding. It's very demanding on him. It's time he was out, late at night at some nights, making phone calls 10, 11 o'clock at night. And so, and then for their family, for Joe's family, he says to be grounded in the Word and thrive in that city so they can live there for many years. They're there long term. They're there long term.
That's awesome.
And so, so just pick up one of those cards and be praying for those specific things for them on next Sunday. As you head out, you'll see them there. I think I have 20 in those slots, and maybe all of them need to be gone. Put them on your fridge, or you can grab a prayer guide that we printed for the missions conference. Joe and Andy's pages in there as well, and so and other mission partners are in there as well. So just utilize those resources that we've done in house here to be able to help you know who they are, who our partners are, and how you can be praying for them on a daily basis with your family. So,
well, I've been asking questions, so now I'm going to let y'all. Is there something else that you really want to pass on to the congregation as a part of this discussion, part of this conversation?
Well, obviously, don't believe everything you see in the news. It kind of paints a bleak picture of an area that's thriving in many ways, and see people differently. See them as people who need the gospel. We met people from Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, Syria, of course, Iraq, many other countries, Zimbabwe. So many that we would often think of as adversaries to the U.S., and, their governments are.
Yeah.
But not everybody is like their government.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some good conversations with folks and still keep in touch with them. And they're our brothers and sisters in Christ, and I love them. I think I've established some friendships that I hope I get to go back and grow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just one last thing, just everybody's aware of, speaking of the government there, the government's it's an interesting government. You want the government on your side. A lot of things get done quicker if you have influence with the government. And one of those ways is coming up soon in April, and I have it here somewhere. April, there is a first ever Kurdistan National Prayer Breakfast, April 22nd through the 25th in Erbil. So the government is hosting a prayer breakfast
across all faiths there, which are many.
Yeah. And so, but a part of that is some of the guys. Joe will be a part of that. The pastor Erbil Baptist, David Lawrence, and one of the assistant pastors there, elders. Can't remember his name. But anyway, so that's one way that you can be praying as well, praying for that, and for God to open up doors for them to have influence with the government, to be able to even purchase some land, right next to the church, to be able to build on, to continue this work of the school, and so as it grows and flourishes. So,
and that was something in the Storms in the Desert podcast. They talked about that they had been praying for, and then this was it a prince or somebody that was.
It was the sheik.
Gave him the land and
gave him the land. Twice that happened.
So we need to be praying for that.
Yeah, praying for favor there. Because it's a possibility. It could come to fruition. But again, the government kind of controls a lot of things, especially land, and et cetera, et cetera. But
I think one last thing I'd like to clear up. And we talk about persecution over there. And when we think of persecution, we think of, if they become a believer, they're going to get their head cut off. That's not necessarily the case over there. You may have some outlier family. It's an honor-shame culture, but you might have some outliers that might still commit an honor killing, although it's very rare. But the biggest problems with persecution there are loss of family, loss of family ties, and that also dictates what kind of job you have.
Yeah.
So, for example, there was one guy there that was at the picnic we got to go to. He was there with his 3 kids, and he doesn't get to see them a lot because he became a believer, and his wife divorced him and took the kids and barely lets him see them.
Yeah.
So, persecution looks more like that.
Yeah, it's real, but it looks like that. Yeah.
And it is real because they take family ties a lot more
Yes.
seriously than we do, you know.
Yeah.
Somebody in our family, disowns us, like, well, okay, I guess so.
Yeah.
But over there, it's
tied to everything.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
exactly. Job, influence, position.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then family.
I remember that even from way back when we started doing missions differently. We went to missions conferences back it was me and Eric Donop went, I guess I was about 2015, maybe even earlier than that. And one of the things that we were taught, this was about the Indian culture at the time, was that kind of mindset. And actually, I think Chinese culture of, we in the West, we're independent. And we're fine with being independent. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's not their culture.
Not at all.
Their culture is dependent on one another and interdependent among each other.
Yeah.
And so if you tell someone that they're going to have to break all those bonds, for us it's like you said, we're independent. It's okay.
I can make it.
Me and my
Yeah,
family,
we're
we'll
good.
be fine. But that's not the case in
that's not the
that
case
society.
there.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And they're just such a warm and hospitable people. Perfect strangers will invite you to lunch in their home, to have tea with them. If you think Southern hospitality is a thing, you haven't experienced Middle Eastern hospitality yet. That was my first go around with it, and we have a lot to learn.
Yeah, I think we take our Southern hospitality for granted. I think actually sometimes we're not very hospitable.
Yeah.
No.
We have folks come to our church and we're
We
happy
talk
to
a
say
big
hello, and then we move on with the people we know and forget about that guest that's sitting behind
That's
us,
right,
kind of
yeah.
thing. So we probably have some to work on that
Sure.
as a church,
Yeah.
and as just Southern people, we think we're good at it, but I'm not sure we are. So anyway, anything else towards Sunday night? I mean, I'm excited to hear the presentation and just see the congregation's response. Maybe God will even Sunday night touch somebody's heart that's been thinking about what could I do missions wise. Maybe they came to the missions conference. Maybe they have been struggling, and this could be right up their alley. That'd be awesome to see that happen. So
I'm looking forward. We haven't planned this yet, but I'm putting it out here now, so hopefully it'll happen. To put some pictures up of some of the pastoral internships that we met.
yeah.
And pray for them specifically because they're going and doing the work that we talk about.
Yeah. I think it'll be a good encouragement to us and help us to continue to dream big because we got a big God, you know.
That's right.
And how can He use us in the kingdom? That's what we want to be about.
Amen.
All right, well, that'll wrap it up for today. And remember, we are always for God, for Dothan, and for the world.